If you're a beginner at using Godot 3D and the tutorials you've found on YouTube are either too complicated or too specific or skip too much of the explanation, then my friend, this is the video for you. I'm the Swedish game dev, and let's take a journey together on our simple quest to learn some basic things about creating a first-person game in Godot. Let's go! I'm just assuming that you've downloaded and installed Godot, and I've opened it up, and here is the project manager. And we want to create a new project, and we'll name this Horror FPS Baby Steps, because that's what we're going to take. We're going to take baby steps. It doesn't matter which one of these renderers you choose, so I'll just use the forward plus. And then you click Create Folder, and then you click Create. And now we're in Godot. And since we are creating a 3D game, we are going to use the 3D scene. And if you're totally new to Godot, what you see here is the 3D world. And here we have our scenes and nodes, and I'll try to explain what that is. And here we have the inspector. And the inspector lets you inspect things. So we're going to create a 3D game. So let's create a 3D scene. And to understand what these nodes and scenes do, I find it really useful to name things in a logical way. So we're going to name this first node Universe. This node is our universe where our game takes place. And we're going to save it by pressing Command S. And now we have our universe. But if we press the play button up here in the right, and first we have to confirm that the universe is our main scene, we will see that our universe is void and empty. But we will fix that. Okay, so first things first. Our universe has to contain a world. So I click on my universe node, and then I press Command A or Control A on Windows, and then I select Node 3D and create. And this node I will name World. And I think this really helps us understand what's going on here. We have a universe, and in our universe there is a world, and in our world there will be a ground. So we press on our world and click Command A and type CSG, and you will see CSG box 3D. And this will create a 3D box that will be our ground. Just double click it. Here we have our ground, and now if you press play, we will still see that our universe is empty and void, because there is still no one to see anything. But we'll get to that later. This box is going to be our ground, and right now it's just an empty 3D shape that has no physical attributes at all. It's like air or a ghost cube. But we'll start by naming it ground, so we know that this is actually the ground. And we want to change the ground's size because we don't want to live on a strange square planet. We're going to change its size. So up here on the right in the inspector, we will change its X size to 25 because we create a modest world. And then we will increase the Z value by 25 meters also. And now, while hovering this 3D view, I am scrolling my mouse wheel to zoom out so we can see our world. If I press down the mouse wheel, I can spin my world around, and if I scroll it, I zoom in. With our ground selected, we want to make it look more like ground, so we have to give it a material, so it's not just an empty ghost box. So up here in the right, in the inspector, just beside the CSG box 3D, we have material, and here we'll click where it says empty and click New Standard Material 3D. And this can be confusing at the beginning because a lot of times when you watch tutorials, you wonder, why don't I see the same options as that guy? And when it comes to these 3D objects, you have to click this shape. Always click this shape, and then you get all the options that you always wondered where they were. And we're gonna just focus on a few things right now. We're gonna focus on the albedo, which is the color, and we're gonna change it from white to something more green. So play around until you find a nice green. And now our ground is green. But we have to take a few more steps to make this ground ready to be a ground. So we have to add some more components to it. And these components are called nodes, and we add them by pressing Command A or Control A. And what we first want is what is called a static body 3D. And you notice when I had ground selected and I added this static body 3D, it became a child, an under component to the ground. And this static body 3D component just tells Godot that this ground is in fact, it's not a ghost shape, it's a static body 3D. It's a static thing, a static physical thing that doesn't move. You can see warning here, and that's because Godot thinks that this component should have at least another component, and that's a collision shape. So with the static body 3D selected, we will press Command A and create a collision shape 3D. This collision shape makes the ground solid and makes it collidable. But you can see that right now there's another warning, and that's because we haven't defined what kind of collision shape this ground has. So we go over to the inspector on the right, and you see here, collision shape 3D, it says shape empty, and we will just click a new box shape 3D. And right now, this collision shape is much smaller than the ground, so we will make it the same size as the ground by clicking on the blue box here, the box shape, and then we get all the options. This is one of the things that confused me in the beginning, because this wasn't explained properly always, that you have to click here on the box shape. And here we can change the size. So we'll change the X size to 25 and the Z size to 25. And now our collision shape is the same size as the ground. And this has now made our ground solid. And let's try it out. Let's click play, but to the surprise of probably no one, our universe is still void and empty because there's still no one to see this lovely universe. So now we have a universe, and in our universe we have a world, and in our world we have ground, but we have no one to see this ground. So we have to add a player. And this is where you want to use the power of community. Some other great people on the internet have already solved a lot of problems for us by creating a player that we can download. And you find this up here in the top menu. It's called Asset Lib, and if you press there, and in here you access Godot's asset library, and here you can just search for first, and then you will find this simple first-person controller made by the user Aros. Thank you, Aros, for this one. And you click it, and then you just download it into your project, and you also install it. And now down here in our file manager, we have a new folder called assets. And in this assets, we find a simple FPS player. And here we find a new scene that's called player. So to learn how this player works, we can click and read the README file. If you double click it, it will open, and it says it's a simple first-person shooter for Godot engine, ready for immediate use when added to a 3D game. And it's also updated and tested for Godot 4.0.2 stable. And you walk with the default movement keys, which is arrow keys. There's F for flashlight and E for grab physics and space for jump. And we will explore the movement and the flashlight in this tutorial. And this is really awesome because it just works. It's really awesome. Okay, so let's get back to our world. So we will click 3D and we will get back to our world, and we will open the assets folder and the simple FPS player folder, and then grab our player scene and drag it into the world. Click the player and just drag him up a bit so he's not inside the ground. And now when we click play, we have someone to observe this little world, and we can move around with our direction keys and look around with the mouse. And if we press F for flashlight, we get a really small flashlight. But we're going to fix a few of these things and customize it a little bit. So if we press escape, we get our mouse back and we can exit the game. So if you're an FPS player, you probably use the WASD control scheme. Let's implement this in our game right now. If we go up to the Godot menu and click Project and Project Settings, we can find in the second tab what's called Input Map. And here we can change the controls for our game by adding new actions. I'll click here and I call this first new action forward. And then I press enter and we have a new action. And then we type backward and press enter. And remember, it doesn't matter if you write this with capital letters or not, but it's important to know if you did or not, because we're going to use these words in the code later. So if you had a capital letter, we have to use always capital letter. But to make it easy to remember, I almost never use capital letters for this. So let's add also left and let's add right. And here we have our new actions. And if we click an action and then click the plus sign over here on right, we can assign a button for it, and we'll just press W on the keyboard and then OK. And now you can see forward is the key A. And then if we click the plus sign for backward and press S, then we get S for backward, and then we do the same for left, which is A, and then right, which is D. And if we close this down and press play, you will notice that nothing happens. We still have to use the directional keys, and I will show you why. We'll press escape and exit out of this window. And if this is the first time for you, don't be scared. We're going to check out the script of this player. We have our player up here, and we have his script here. So we'll click it and open the script, and here's a lot of scary information, but we're gonna just scroll down to line 74, where it says var input dir equals input get vector UI left, UI right, UI up, and so forth. And this is the key mapping. So here we can change the key mapping to our new control scheme. So we'll just delete UI and have it say left. And remember, spelled the same way as you did in the project settings. And up, we will change it to forward, and down we will change it to backward. And now if we press play, now we can use the vast keys and use our flashlight to jump around in the world. And even though I really like this simple FPS controller, in fact I love it, one of the first things I want to change is the flashlight. I think it's just a little too weak, and we'll open the player scene by clicking this little icon that looks like a movie clipper. And here we can see the details of the player. And in the player's components, we can see the flashlight for the player. And if we click it, we get an inspector for the flashlight. And if we increase the angle from 15 to 30, then now when we play the game, we get a little bit bigger flashlight, which feels a little bit better. Okay, but let's get back to our universe. Our world still looks a bit dull. We want to add something called an environment to this world to make it look not as dull. We click our universe node, and then we press Command A, and we'll type environment, and we'll find world environment, and we'll double click it. And right now you see we get warning because our world environment is empty, but with our world environment selected, also just for making things neat, we will drag our player into the world so that the players are part of the world. And now with the world environment selected, we have to create a new environment. And over here on the right, we have environment, and we click the empty button and just choose new environment, and camera attributes, just a new camera attributes. When we click our environment, we get lots of options. So we can first click the background and change the mode to sky. And now if we check out our game, we have a completely dark world. If we light our flashlight, it lights up a little bit. And this could be great for a true dark horror game, but probably we want it to be not as dark. We will click sky, and we have to create a new sky, and we click the sky again, and we want this sky material to be a new procedural sky. So now when we press play, we get a basic sky. But actually, I want this game to still be dark. So we'll exit out. We'll exit out of the sky. We'll change the energy multiplier to 0.1. Now when we play it, we have more of a night kind of sky. But to finish this world off, we're going to put something more interesting in the world. We're going to put two things. We're going to put in a simple moon, and we're going to put a simple pillar to make use of this moon. So we will click the world and Command A and CSG, and we'll take CSG cylinder this time, create it, double click it to rename it. We'll call this one pillar. And just like before, we have to give it a static body to make it not a ghost pillar, and we have to give it also collision shape 3D, and this collision shape is now going to be a cylinder, a new cylinder shape 3D. And we'll first click the pillar, and just like before, we'll give it a material, a new standard material, and we'll change its albedo to some kind of bluish color. So just play around until you find a bluish color you like. And up here, we can change the cylinder size, just like we could change the ground, and we're going to make its height 10 meters. Just like before, we have to pull our collision shape 3D into the static body 3D so that it knows that it has a collision shape. Otherwise, the pillar will just fall right through the ground. So don't forget that step, like I almost did. And then we'll click this collision shape 3D, and we'll click the blue collision, and we'll click the blue collision cylinder up here, and we'll change its height to 10 meters. So it's the same size as the pillar that we see in the game, because this is invisible. Okay, let's try it out. We have our pillar, so now we have something actually to put our flashlight on, but we'll need a moon to complete this scene. So let's create our moon. Click our world, Command A, and we press CSG, and we will take CSG sphere, because the moon is a sphere, you know, and we will double click it, rename it moon, and we will pull our moon up into the sky, somewhere around here maybe, maybe we'll put it there. And then to make this moon shine, we will give it a directional light. This is a 3D light, and we have now put it inside our moon, and we will drag it around. You see this arrow there is the direction of the light, and using these circles we can spin it, so we'll spin it downwards towards the pillar, like that. And now if we press play again, we have our dramatic moon up there, lighting the scene. And if you think that this is a bit too much light from the moon, we can click it in Inspector Light and decrease its energy, and let's give it the energy of 0.5. Press play, and now it's a little bit less energized up there. And now it's a little bit less energized up there, our moon. Okay, there are some things we could fix. You can see back there is a sun. Maybe we don't want both the sun and the moon, but that will be something for another video. If you follow through in this video, you actually learned quite a lot. If you're a total beginner, you learned how to create a ground with a color. You learned how to create this pillar. You learned how to create a moon. You learned how to create light. And you also learned how to simply implement an FPS controller into a game. Okay, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, just write them in the comment section of this video, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye.